Welcome to my Crusty Coral Kingdom. I'm Crusty Coral Khann, and I'm made of hardened crust. Hard as crust. My kingdom is hard. My crust is hard, and these stickers make me hard. You like these stickers? Rusty's editor has a shop full of Hornet sitting down, Hornet drilling down, Hornet making friends, Hornet as a bait, Brewskis, Silkskis, money strings, and plenty of stickers keeping this kingdom's walls hard and my crust harder. Get 2 sticker sheets and then use code CRUSTY to receive 30% off of both items. The best way to directly support this channel's editor. These deals are hard. This kingdom is hard.
Okay, here's the page I'm going by. There's 48. I don't know why some of these are considered gauntlets. Some of them are just a single enemy, or 2 enemies in a boss encounter, or 2 enemies you can outspace by hiding underneath the lip of the ceiling. But you know me, I don't have time to ask such questions. All I know is there's 48, and we're ranking them all from Piss Baby Mode to Baron of Hell. Number 48, North Marrow. Tallying up all of these made me realize how many gauntlets really existed, and since the number climbed as high as it did, I'm very confident in saying anything else could have occupied this space and it would have made me happier. That lore tablet just below here had the perfect setup to a nasty, grotesque reveal that I absolutely did not temper my hopes responsibly enough for at all. There's only 5 pilgrim enemies in the room, and they each make sure they take as much time as they possibly can just to spawn in. There are plenty of gauntlet rooms that have less or smaller mobs, 1 or 2 rooms might even have both, but you need the cling grip to discover this part of the scene, so high odds you've already snagged a nail upgrade on the way back here to boot. Nothing about this Gauntlets line of enemies feels any more or less challenging than the one at the Marrow's entrance, yet it makes you wait like 4 regions later just to access it. You can get Threadstorm before you even have the capability to get up here, and the fighting space is so small that 1 silk spear from the corner of the room is guaranteed to clear whatever spawned in anyways. I don't know, thanks for the free locket, I guess. Number 47, the Marrow's entrance. The opening gauntlet of the whole game right after you defeat Moss Mother and head through Bone Bottom, so I'm looking for that difficulty slope to flatline like a cyberpsychosis victim, and that's exactly what it gives you. Easily telegraphed spawn points between 6 enemies, 5 of which fall pretty decisively into the cute critter subtype of wild animal, and the only marginal threat is the gauntlet's final enemy, the Skull Brute, who wildly flings around his capacity for double damage in a way that's more pitiful than it is intimidating. Get those pogo reps in because that bulky skull on his head doesn't actually protect shit. You won't have to worry about that until the next region. For now, just take your free W, whack open the gate, and be on your way. Number 46, the Memorium. Why even bother revving up the theme music for this one, cuz? Marching into the end of Act 2 gives you a lot of kill potential, just assuming the amount of tools and upgrades you found, and you're probably arriving to this gauntlet with at least a level 3 needle, and yet 2 mobs with 70 HP apiece isn't even their most ridiculous disadvantage, since they also have Volt Orb attacks that can damage both themselves and allies. These poor, conflict-averse, clumsy little museum curators were just trying to do their job. A spider assassin picking the place clean was the last situation they could have ever been prepared for. She even writes a little footnote in her little journal about how hopeless their work is, like a wild animal in a red dress didn't walk through the front door and start wrecking the venue on sight. Number 45, Act 2, North Hunter's March, the one in, holy shit, how do I even title this one? Jesus Christ. This room right here, the one with the 2 spear scars in it. Any fighting challenge where you're allowed to leave the room for any period of time does not give me a lot of confidence that it even belongs in the video, but the wiki counts it as a gauntlet, and that's enough for me to include it, I guess. God, I hate thinking. Maybe I'd be a bit less precarious to call this a gauntlet if it threw more than 2 mobs at me, or God forbid both at the same damn time at least. This gauntlet recycles the previous room you discover in Act 1 in Hunter's March, only one of the spear scars are replaced with a Skarrgard, an enemy with twice the HP and twice the damage. 1 whole act before this one, and you have to fight them both at the same time. Oh, and don't forget you're also allowed to leave and take panel questions at any time during the function. This is an Act 2 gauntlet, and it receives so many mechanical downgrades from the one prior that it's kind of unbelievable the game even throws it at you. It feels like a weird afterthought where someone was just like, we should put another encounter here just because we know most people won't think to return here and won't ever see it. And then it ends up in a YouTube video 7 months later and people are like, holy shit, I didn't know that. I've been playing this game for 1,000 hours and still learning new shit every day. That's my impression of my comment section. The modeled Scar needs to die for this room to even happen. Quit treating me like I found a controller yesterday and tried to power a rice cooker with it. I know what a fucking video game is. Number 44, the Sawblade Room. Piss easy, but equally piss fun in my opinion. Using the platforms to activate the Sawblade traps is a cool gimmick that, when you're captured, becomes your only reliable means of dealing enough damage to keep up with what the gauntlet throws at you. This is a necessary stop on your path to retrieving your items if you get captured by by a wardenfly, but you can also make a stop here by your own choice during Act 2 with all your equipment, at which point the gimmick it's not really worth engaging with anymore. If anything, the game's decision to leave them active if you get here with all your shit just makes for an extra obstacle you have to play around. Either way, it's just a couple guards mixed in with mostly scab flies. You just press some buttons, trigger some traps, then get going. Number 43, Shellwood. Why does this gauntlet even need a bench sitting right above it? What am I gonna do, die? Look at this lineup. Almost half the gauntlet is just lazily hovering flowers that occasionally let out a spore shroom in the vicinity. The third and final wave teases a possible cough in the direction of being kind of difficult because it's the only wave in the gauntlet that contains both a fascia flower and splinter enemies. That whirling jump attack actually hits twice if you get caught by it, just in case you needed to know that. I didn't know that because I've never been hit by it. Shellwood enemies in general are just huge pushovers. Some of them don't even attack you. Where are the pond catchers? Why aren't they anywhere in this gauntlet? It wouldn't have made sense because you're not near like a water source or anything, but you only face mobs with area denial and melee tactics. A ranged enemy could have been exactly what this gauntlet needed to feel at least kinda challenging. Number 42, the Sinner's Road Simple Key Gauntlet. I'm gonna be honest, Roach Keepers have some pretty massive testicles. They've got a charge attack, a chain whip attack that zones the area a la Covetous Pilgrim, and a spike brace that protects them from needle pogos, which is why they remain entirely invincible during their somersault maneuver. I don't know where these dudes unlock so many kill streaks in one match, but when a Roach Keeper is the only thing you have to worry about, almost none of it actually helps in practice. The best time to punish them is right after they do literally anything. And with incredibly weak damage modifiers early game, chopping them down doesn't feel nearly as exhausting as the 100 HP pool would imply. There's also one of them, like that's the whole gauntlet. The whole gauntlet is this one enemy. And I'm gonna be honest, one of just about any enemy in a combat gauntlet setting registers with no more impact than a fart in a retirement home. Number 41, Eastern Farfields. No idea who really wanted this one Skarrgard to be counted as a gauntlet just because the gate it's guarding opens when you kill it, but I'm glad I get to talk about this one early because I'm going to use it to lead into a larger discussion about combat gauntlets. Some of them, like Coral Tower and High Halls, are just crazy hard no matter what, yes, but the amount of upgrades and utilities you're given by the time you've reached the late game allows you to flat out neutralize at least one target per wave as long as you're thinking ahead and you know where they're going to spawn in. So when the entire gauntlet is just one wave that contains one enemy, it's nothing. Like, there's no threat here. There's no gauntlet. And this is doubly valid when that one enemy is something that a large percentage of us were stubborn enough to muscle through 10 minutes into the game on a first run before obtaining a dash or even bothering to head in any other direction. We sharpened our claws and spears on this red bitch baby, and now we're supposed to act like the same enemy with just a little eldritch sass thrown in gets us running for the hills? Don't get me wrong. A black-threaded Skarrgard is a pretty beefy threat, but 300 HP is just kind of unimpressive in Act 3, and any build thrown together with enough confidence and user familiarity will annihilate this man's entire family lineage. Number 40, Chapel of the Wanderer. One of the greatest rewards for one of the cakiest of cakewalks with extra vanilla frosting on the side. Trek through the wormways, bash a few pilgrims, even if you haul ass straight there in the first 10 minutes. It's still relatively easy to handle because pilgrim-type enemies have very little mobility or variety in their tactics. The only kind of major threat here is the pilgrim guide that pops out and starts whacking you with his giant 2-damage kettlebell. But being a ground-based enemy means that if you know its spawn point and you can just fill up that space with as much various aids and damage as you want, and the guide will either die to that or the silk spear you have conveniently lined up for the job afterwards. Number 39, the Deep Docks Forge Room. The Deep Docks region is where the game becomes acutely aware of your capabilities and starts setting half of its cards to defense mode. Every mob in this gauntlet can block attacks from at least one direction, teaching you pretty early into the game how to juggle multiple combat strategies. Pogoing, for instance, is good against the sifters when they charge at you, but all other enemies in the room wear head protection that nullifies pogos. I say the word strategy with the utmost disregard for the English language because hitting an enemy and then moving slightly to the left to avoid a poke hardly feels like a strategy, and standing underneath someone's ass and smacking it until they die is much less so in comparison. It's just a combat room that teaches you the basic motions of dealing with enemies that aren't complete punching bags. That's about it. Like, oh, this one has a shield, so I have to like jump first and then attack. You know, just like general shit that starts feeling very basic as soon as you leave the region. Number 38, the Hunter's March Shakra Gauntlet. I just decided to call this room the Shakra Gauntlet because if you find it prior prior to visiting Greymoor, Shakra will fly in to help after the very first enemy has been dealt with. And that moment is where I'm pretty okay with just calling the room finished. Shakra's mobility is something to behold. Even during her boss fight in Act 2, it is the first thing you notice about her. Like, she is annoying as shit. I remember thinking the ants were going to be the biggest mobility flex in the game, and they still sort of are to an extent, but the gap in combat expertise between Shakra and these poor ants is wide enough to be considered a national landmark. I still don't know how to fight this room because I just don't feel like I've ever needed to. Like, what's the point? I just sat in a corner and left Shakra to her own devices, and she was perfectly capable of zeroing the entire room out as long as I just avoided shit. Like, what are these rings made of? Number 37, Central Greymoor. Neither enemy presented in this gauntlet here is much of a threat. I guess the Threadraker is slightly more of one due to the multiple attacks and 50 HP, but it would help if he had some reinforcements and didn't show up by himself 20 minutes late to the reception like a confused homeless man trying to bum some of the salsa chips. I think the point of this gauntlet is that it throws brand new enemies at you that you couldn't possibly have seen before because you can only enter it from the right side, coming from the halfway home, and everything to the right of it is just crows and I guess like 2 dread catchers. But you needed to have first climbed high enough to get to that part of the map anyways and activate the elevator, which requires going through this combat room in Act 1, so point stands nonetheless. These mobs are supposed to be a jump scare, and when looked at through this lens, I can understand why the room didn't want to cram too many of these enemies into the same challenge, but it just feels like a speed bump. I think what could have really spiced it up is the inclusion of the silk snippers. Don't change anything about the arena itself, don't give them like platforms to dig through and shit, just have them be an enemy that engages with you normally, so that later on when you see them out in the open in the western portion of Greymoor, their ability to hop between platforms becomes a nice little jump scare, you know? Like, oh shit, they can do that? I don't know, one person thought that idea was cool when I said it. This part of the paragraph is for that one person. Number 36, the Cogwork Core Silksong Gauntlet. You know how like the DVD logo never hits the exact corner of the screen? Yeah, this one's way too easy. The one thing I love more than sinking damage into a beefy spherical dartboard is sinking damage into 2 beefy spherical dartboards that can't run away from it because they decided a butler's pantry was the perfect spot for an ambush. Conch cutters are hilariously strong here since the room is so tiny, which just gives them more ricochet potential, and it's almost impossible to fuck up a thread storm here, so just go nuts. Even with a silent HP boost and a 0.8 damage modifier, these clappers still get clapped. Number 35 and number 34, the Slab North. I'm just gonna call this the Neck Snap Gauntlet. I think there's a pretty obvious reason why I'm calling it that. I'm just surprised an alternative gauntlet is even here. Like the whole idea of multiple combat room variants by themselves, I think is already impressive enough, but like this room and the one with the Spear Scar duo and Hunter's March, absolutely nobody just goes and looks for these. This gauntlet is here to impress like 9 people. The differences between the two aren't even that major. I had to read the wave lineup on the wiki multiple times just so I could properly explain what they are in the script. But the first difference is that in the Act 2 variant, a Guardfly and a Wardenfly will spawn in at the same time, whereas in Act 1 they would have been separated. On Wave 2, the captured variant spawns in 2 Scabflies and a Guardfly, while the Act 2 variant spawns in 2 Guardflies. And then the final big difference is the 2 Wardenflies that spawn in on the final wave, while the Act 1 gauntlet replaces one of the Wardenflies with a Guardfly instead. Difficulty-wise, the lineup order doesn't really matter. The whole idea is that you're ambushing a group of guards, so obviously it kind of tracks that either gauntlet would be pretty easy to handle. But although these changes seem innocuous at a glance, the combat waves are restructured like this to compensate for one less Wardenfly to fight during the Act 2 variant of the room, so that the generational manhandling of the Wardenfly wearing her outfit at the beginning of the scene actually makes sense. Buy this game for a friend right now. Holy shit, you did not pay enough for this game. Buy it again. Number 33, Chapel of the Reaper. Not a huge deal, barely an inconvenience. Only 6 enemies, 3 of which are just the exact same ones you faced in the gauntlet prior, but now there are silk snippers digging holes in and out of the fighting space. The chapel is also guarded by several of these little shits, so by the time you sink your teeth into the combat room itself, they won't pose enough of a surprise element to actually be threatening. The iframes they get when guarding with their scissor weapons turns them into some pretty durable mobs. They're kind of like an upgraded variant of the smelt shovelers in the deep docks. 2 silk snippers make up the final wave, and it's as simple as baiting out a lunge attack and then giving them a nice positively affirming slap on the top of the head. Number 32, the Citadel Spa Room. Not the exact chamber containing the spa room, but the one right next to the spa room is where the gauntlet is. So the cocktail of GLP-1s, antipsychotics, and Indonesian weight loss pills I take every morning before breakfast almost made me forget this room was even here. Either that or this gauntlet just sucks. And even still, there's a way to thin out the ranks by destroying the Claw Maiden nest in High Halls, leaving you with only 8 enemies to fight instead of 10. If you freed the Green Prince in Sinner's Road, he'll wind up here later on in his journey to Verdania if you've cleared the gauntlet, so you've got a pretty damn good reason to go out and search for it. I just wish the gauntlet itself gave me something a bit more memorable. Anything more threatening than a couple reads the game is just too shy to test you on for whatever reason. Number 31, the Deep Docks Swift Step Gauntlet. Even when avoiding Hunter's March outright, the ants have a way of catching up with you. This one is technically found in Hunter's March, but going for Swift Step means you're way more likely to approach the gauntlet from the Deep Docks route, and the stakes are nice and low since you don't even have your core movement ability yet, so anything more threatening than a Scar Scout the game is just too afraid to throw at you. Being completely starved of dodge options means you're limited to just moving out of the way of shit, so the scouts might get in a lucky snipe or two on occasion, but the game accounting for your lack of movement makes picking the room clean a pretty simple task. The first wave even lies to you because one of the scouts sitting by the lamp just forgets he left his kids at the soccer game or something and pisses off right upon entry. I always just threw a pin at him anyways before I actually started the gauntlet. I never just walked in and fought shit normally, so I just assumed the pin was what triggered the leave, and I just thought it was a cool way of immediately taking one enemy out of the gauntlet, like I discovered tech or something. Nah, he just leaves as soon as you enter anyways. Yeah, this one ain't shit. Number 30, Craw Lake. Your only core movement ability at this point in the game is a normal dash and sprint. The smaller crawls don't attack very frequently and are really just there as an extra nuisance while you deal with the larger ones, but you're not quite torqued enough to manhandle a room with lots of flying mobs hard enough to call it cake. The room is generous with its placement of larger craw mobs that shows a respectable amount of restraint. If a tall craw or a squat craw spawns in, all the other enemies are just going to be craws, and it isn't until the final wave of the gauntlet where a tall craw and a squat craw both engage you at the same time. I feel like this gauntlet knew how high its potential could be for it to feel insufferable to chop through, which is why it shows the restraint that it does. And although that's going to take off considerable points in the challenge department, fun is just always what matters more, and I think this gauntlet is a good demonstration of that. Number 29, the Underworks Steam Room. This is one of the first gauntlets you can find in Act 2 if you took the pilgrimage route into the Underworks, and clearing it gives you access to the Delver Drill, which is one of the highest damaging red tools in the game. I expected this one to have a bit more fanfare than just 4 dudes attached to it. The steam gates deal 2 damage on contact, but it feels like intimidation tactics are really their only purpose here, since I was never really that in danger of hitting them. Using cross stitch in half of these rooms kind of neutralizes environmental threats and hazards because you don't really need more fighting space if all you have to do is press a button and enjoy your iframes. Bear in mind you are approaching Act 2 from the left-hand side of the Citadel if you found this gauntlet, so cross-stitch probably isn't something you have yet. But the Underwork enemies are really just not that tanky at all. Like, even the Undercranks only have like 70 HP, so 4 mobs that appear in waves of 2 at a time just leads me to believe these steam gates here were probably intended as a much bigger threat than they are in practice. Number 28, the Hunter's March Entrance. I mean, shit, it's still kinda hard. Just because I've got to the point where I can rev up a new save and be speedbagging his testes like Sugar Ray Robinson 10 minutes into the journey doesn't mean I can just not call him kinda hard. If he's that easy for you, then that just means practice got you up to that point. I'm trying to make something that at least attempts to be fair here. Skarrgards are 150 HP, and when the most intimidating thing you faced prior is a 30 HP Skull Brute, being at the business end of whatever that thing is in his hand is just not something you're gonna be interested in, unless you're stubborn, like I am, and like a lot of us are, because you'll have also keenly noticed the shiny gate behind him blocking all the fun you paid for. This instills a renewed vigor in one's fighting spirit like steroids to an Olympic gold medalist, and 2 or 3 playthroughs later, dealing with the lack of a dodge button has just led to you getting really good at spacing out motherfuckers, and suddenly the 150 HP pimple in the room is just begging to be popped. Number 27, the Deep Docks Mask Shard Room. You know what? I ain't afraid to say it. This gauntlet kicked my shit and bopped my head last September, and like in a very negative way. Much how a warrior experiences death by 1,000 cuts, lots of little tediums get piled onto each other here in this room. The arena being bookended by hot coals lies the foundation by providing a small but important limit to your movement. Next, throw a bunch of shit at the player that requires just a bit of movement like the Pilgrim Hulk or 4 Beast Flies in a single wave, scenarios that just paint it to where taking damage from a small error just becomes very easy. And there's not much else to say here. I just think this room does a very good job of that. Number 26, Central Underworks. Easy and fun, and just a nice little empty thread at the last minute that reveals gear hazards at the bottom of the arena, only to have you fight like 2 more dudes and oh shit, that's the end? Alright, that's it then. That last bit of platforming at the end is honestly the hardest part of the whole gauntlet, and not even that matters too much because the enemies that spawn in afterwards are likely to make their way towards you regardless because they're just naturally aggressive, creating a window for you to just not engage with the platforming at all. Just wait until they're near you, pop a Threadstorm, and that's one gauntlet off your to-do list. Number 25, the Cauldron. My galactically dense ass got swatted by one of the haulers on a first playthrough, but I feel like I can still talk a healthy amount of shit and not feel like a hypocrite. How does it feel being one of the only enemies in the whole game that gets hard countered by a couple sour notes? God damn, maybe Hornet isn't as good at playing that thing as we thought. The arrival of this undercrank here makes me feel like the game just forgot he was an enemy for a while and then aggressively overcompensates for it by emergency dropping a fresh one in right through the ceiling. The lineup isn't anything you don't have previous fighting experience with, but the abundance of haulers makes whacking through it feel a bit uncoordinated at times. Was hoping for an array of enemies that forces the use of Clawline a bit more, seeing how you literally just got it. It's probably one of the most versatile and most important combat tools you ever receive, but there aren't too many enemies that seem built for the purpose of using it. Number 24, Whiteward. Seeing Sherma in danger injects a surge of adrenaline into your central nervous system that thankfully shaves most of the difficulty off of the chamber, which is a net positive in my opinion because having to deal with those morticians in such an enclosed fighting space has me begging for every advantage the game would like to give me. It's a short gauntlet with small waves, and once you clear out the morticians, the rest of the fight doesn't feel too overwhelming. The surgeons are even nice enough to kindly telegraph when they resurface, making them complete pushovers in almost every situation they ever appear in. And honestly, 5 moderately difficult enemies is the lightest work I've ever had to do for a spool fragment. Good side quest. Gauntlet, not that good. Gauntlet could use some work, but the side quest is great. Number 23, Act 3, High Halls. And this is where I'm forced to bring attention to a pretty egregious hole in the current criteria. The lack of working doors inflicts this gauntlet with a glaring problem that undermines a majority of its intended difficulty, as it opens up the hallway prior, allowing the player a territorial advantage that lets you point and laugh at a 460 HP linebacker of an enemy, squeezing all of his vigor into the empty space of the doorway like he's trying to push a hockey puck through a garden hose. It is a shameful deficit of both combat skill and spatial awareness. They assigned a covert stealth op to a fucking sumo wrestler, and it's the reason I never looked at this room as a true to form gauntlet, because that, in my opinion, requires the room to be bookended by locked doors, with victory being your only escape, and trying to include what's widely considered a gauntlet by most into this video list results in a frustratingly low placement for a pair of enemies I think could have really went the distance if given a proper chance. Number 22, Whispering Vaults Act 2. Vault Keepers can be found exclusively in the Whispering Vaults region in the Citadel, meaning this gauntlet that prefaces the region will almost definitely be the first time you encounter one. Fittingly, it's the hardest enemy to deal with in the gauntlet, but only because it's an enemy you've never fought before, and the vaults make sure to throw up as much child-proof padding as possible by giving you a wide open space with no obstacles and no additional enemies to fight, which I think could have made these waves a bit more interesting. Each wave prefacing the Vault Keeper is a light seasoning of pilgrim enemies, and one other enemy that just barely sticks out as like a slightly bigger threat, usually either a reed or a chorister. No magic tricks or cheap punches, nothing you haven't gotten your hands dirty with before, and because of this, the gauntlet feels more exhausting than it does challenging. Vault Keepers are tough to read, but they're not like triple-decker stacked or anything. Like, you've dealt with way worse just getting to the Citadel in the first place, and 4 whole waves worth of opposition as a build-up to a 70 HP mob that doesn't know how to deal with pogos is such a sour note that it just has me dreading this particular room on repeat playthroughs when I know it's coming. Number 21, the Halfway Home. This cellar is like visiting your step-grandmother in the hodunk butt cracks of rural Texas, and every room in the house just has a different problem that gets harder to ignore. The living room has rotten fast food behind the couch, and you think that's the worst of it, but then you find the bathroom and see termites eating through the drywall, and you're pretty sure you saw one of them holding a toothpick like it's a spear. It's a gauntlet that applies a very proper crescendo from minor inconvenience up to something laughably ridiculous. The wave begins with the Spear Stalker immediately entering stage right and taking out the cellar wall with it. More ants fly in as you start chopping down the first wave, guiding you towards the top half of the scene, just for a Skarrgard to flex his demolition experience on the remaining right side of the cellar wall. This is when the pace of the combat becomes less about the platforming and more about the actual fighting, because the attacks from the Skarrgard usually end up destroying at least a couple platforms by the time you're you're done. It's an eventful combat gauntlet, but it's not exactly a difficult one. Having the ants crash through parts of the arena is a fun way to increase the fighting space you're allowed to play with as new waves are brought in. And despite the large number of mobs that spawn, the escalation is at a reasonable enough pace that it doesn't really feel overwhelming. Playing through this combat gauntlet for the first time is an amusing experience. Your inner dialogue very quickly jumps from not a big deal to this is the worst infestation I've ever seen. Like, holy shit, it's no wonder Krieg didn't want to get the nectar himself. Brother was harboring a whole ass colony in his basement. I wouldn't waste my time with that shit either, fuck. Number 20, Disgraced Chef Lugoli. I don't know how big of a jump scare it's going to be seeing Lugoli this far up any single list in Silksong history, but there are a lot more easy gauntlets than there are easy bosses, in my opinion, and I think that's because so many little rewards and tools and things you find in the game are guarded by a small gauntlet of dudes that barely even pass as a gauntlet in the first place, but it's enough to justify that item being there. Vault vessels, the mask shard in deep docks, one enemy just dropping a random item that you can like break for shell shards or whatever, like it can be anything. She's an easy boss fight if you're well equipped and you don't put her off until Act 3, but anything with 600 HP and double damage with a debuff on the side that eats up an entire blue space on your crest just to counter it, that's gonna do some pretty insane numbers on a gauntlet ranking. If anything, I might be throwing the list by not putting her a bit higher, but we'll see. Number 19, Act 1, North Hunter's March, the much more challenging variant of the gauntlet I was talking about earlier with the 2 spear scars. And there's a couple things here I want to talk about, because not only is this gauntlet variant noticeably more difficult than an Act 2 counterpart, but I don't think much of it has to do with your amount of upgrades at either time. I mean, it obviously has something to do with it, but a lot of it I think has to do with how the gauntlet is structured and the enemies contained in it. 2 of the same enemy, even larger enemies, will obviously have identical tactics, which can be a bit overloading sensory-wise, but it also just means less mob shenanigans and shit you have to predict and pay attention to and whatnot. But 2 different enemies, and specifically 2 enemies that engage with you differently and counter different tactics, can get extremely hard to deal with, especially during the first act, since Cling Grip is the only platforming tool you need to climb up here. You definitely don't have the buffet of traps and killing machines you'll be carrying with you into the endgame, and having less combat tactics available to you means a near guarantee that at least one enemy in this room will aggressively counter whatever setup you have going. Number 18, Act 3, Central Greymoor. On and off the court, straight fundamentals, you stupid piece of shit. Basics, Zuko, remember the basics. That pair of thread rakers at the end looks pretty mean, but them sawtooth spines are meaner. What the fuck is a roach keeper doing here? Sinner's Road is the neighboring region, yes, but it's still a decent distance away from Western Greymoor, and it's still impressive that an enemy this far away from his home region has no reason or implicit lore attached to how he made it here. This roach keeper saw the archangels in a dream and started speaking Limburgish in his sleep. Maybe he was a former pilgrim who recognized the error of his sinful ways and then started legging it to the steps and then got dunked on by an armada of blue-collar workers. Don't answer any of these questions, by the way. He's dead, I killed him, I no longer give a shit. Also, this is Act 3. Like, fighting thread rakers should not be a problem by now. Rake your threads across his face and watch him take 100+ damage from any silk skill available. Number 17, the Farfield's Tarmite Gauntlet. God, this footage is boring as shit. Wouldn't you have preferred something more engaging? Don't worry, I would have too. A very intimidating looking gauntlet made vastly simpler with the application of double jump and maybe an Ascendant Grip and a Cogflyer 5 to save some effort. I do not know how to fight Tarmites, and if you give me a tool strong enough to solo them for me, I'm not gonna have any interest in learning. I also don't know how to beat this gauntlet. I just know I've done it, and I'm never replaying this part of the game again. I'll thug it out with 9 HP, I don't give a shit. I feel an inexorably large amount of pride in just telling as many people as I possibly can to use the grip and the cogfly and then just shut my mouth, because that's how you should beat this room. That's what this room deserves. If you're gonna shove me into a pit without a floor and force me to start fly swatting, I just get to opt right out of that shit like a credit card offer, because the game itself gave me the option to do so. Number 16, the Broodmother. Introducing this gauntlet by saying it has 11 enemies before a big boss is kind of clickbait, since over half of the opposing force comprises fruit flies that trigger a shit-splosion upon death. The preliminary wave of mobs at this point into Act 2 is unchallenging and unfulfilling. But just as an army general sends in the shitty squads first, the waves exist entirely just to exhaust as much of your resources as their limited time on this planet will allow. If it takes using tools or silk in any any capacity just to take them down, that means they've done their job. And whoever is lucky enough to actually get in a hit basically earns a purple heart and gets a statue built in their honor, because either that guard fly was truly beyond the call of duty, or you just suck balls like a cordless Dyson. As for the queen bitch herself, she got some mix-ups. Like, she honestly has moves I wasn't ready for, because part of her moveset involves the continuous summoning of even more fresh flies during her fight. You've got some CC shenanigans with her glob attacks to worry about, and a second phase pinballing slam attack a la Broodmother, and before you even know what's happening, you actually kind of feel like you're trying to kill a boss in a video game for once. Broodmother is hard in the same way dealing with a caffeinated child is hard. Like, yeah, it'll demand a bit of attention and some stamina on your part, but thugging it out ain't that big a deal. Number 15, Crawfather. Honestly, I really like how this fight feels. The boss only gains access to one new attack, which is the spike chain attack once he's down to 60% HP, and the mobs could stand to be more threatening, I think, but ignoring them outright also doesn't feel completely safe. The gauntlet is structured in this really engaging way so that going after either the boss or the juror mobs needs a clear yet very separate commitment from the player. Crawfather, for instance, is very ground-based and therefore vulnerable to grounded tools, cogwheel, tax, shit like that. But employing such tools against the juror mobs obviously accomplishes dick up to and including the balls. Anti-air tactics like Sting Shard, Threefold Pin, and Curve Sickle make short work of the crow jurors, but pointing them towards the air means they almost definitely get countered by the boss's giant metal Burger King crown. You're very often put in a position where you have to consciously choose what your target is gonna be, either the jurors or the boss, and I like that a lot. I think it adds a reasonable amount of challenge while staying on its side of the fence. Good gauntlet, fun fight. Number 14, Bilehaven. Once again, I can only hope people deal with the whiplash of Grolls reaching a favorable spot on any list that's ever been conceived in the history of man, but that's in no small part due to the Stilken Trapper mobs that like hovering just below the ceiling for 90% of their active time above water. It's easy to say a well-placed Threadstorm or a Cross Stitch can zero them out, which is true most of the time, but unless I've got my hands on Ascendant Grip and I can just chill out near the ceiling and make them play by my rules when they resurface, often does it feel like using a skill and expending Silk is one of my only options to effectively deal with them. And that takes quite a toll on your resources in a gauntlet setting where grabbing Silk is very limited. You're almost never in a position where you can win their game. You have to force them to play yours. Volt Vessels and Volt Filament can both be huge wrenches in everyone's attack plan here, so much so that it almost feels required at times. And I've never been hit by the spiked Wrecking Ball contraptions that swing in, but I do remember laughing the first time I saw them. The presence of something like this in other gauntlets could have just made them way more fun and alive feeling. You know, like the obese ant bitch just Kool-Aid manning through the fucking wall in the halfway home basement. Like, that shit was awesome. Number 13, Northeastern Cogwork Core. At the very beginning of Act 3, this room is a masterfully executed bag-over-the-head sucker punch directly on the chin. It only gives you 4 enemies in total, and none of them would pose a blip on the radar under normal circumstances. But this is your introductory gauntlet to Act 3 that showcases Void Corruption via Black Thread, and the most major difference between the enemies of yesterday and the enemies of now. And I believe the enemies in this gauntlet are carefully and selectively picked to demonstrate why these changes are such a big deal, since the Undercrakes take noticeably more hits since the HP scaling is determined by a multiplier, and the Underloft and Underpoke now deal twice the damage they would have normally. As an additional setback, just to make sure you have the worst time with this possible, you begin Act 3 with the same nasty 1 HP debuff you dealt with at the start of the game, and getting your hands on Silk between now and the gauntlet is kinda difficult, which forces you into this uncomfortable game of catch-up that, on a first playthrough, you wouldn't even be thinking about, because you wouldn't know a gauntlet is down here waiting for you. It's not a hard lineup of enemies at all, but you only find the room after every negative extenuating circumstance has had its turn kicking the shit out of you. And that's on top of the haymaker realization that every enemy you thought you were familiar with just unlocked the God mode cheat at the start menu. This room is fucking scary. Number 12, Cogwork Core Act 2. This gauntlet puts up a deliberate and kind of impressive effort just to be a pain in the ass, and whether or not that earns your respect is, well, it's up to you personally. I'm just the messenger. Cleanser bots are already my least favorite type of Citadel machination with my least favorite type of zoning attack that covers just enough real estate around itself that the only options you have available is to just dash away completely or just jump directly on top of it and hope your pogo game is sharp and steady enough. The game demonstrates that it is acutely aware of this by placing a cleanser cleanser on one of two narrow platforms in the gauntlet, but its decision on which platform it spawns is determined by which platform you jump to when the middle two platforms disappear. So if you decide to take the left, the cleanser will spawn on the right, and vice versa, forcing the initiative onto you. This is where I learned how good the Delver Drill is at disarming defenders and cleansers. The gauntlet teaches you invaluable skills and combat knowledge the only way a game ever really can, by throwing you into the fray like a rat in a neuroscience experiment and just watching what happens. Well, it's been 8 months, but if you're still extrapolating from incomplete data, then I've got some findings to report. Don't put a fucking hazard on the ceiling and then ask me to start jumping over shit. Number 11, Hunter's March, Act 3. I think Hunter Ants are fighting for the top spot on my shit list for least favorite black-threaded mob. Even though you should be more than familiar with every single offensive tactic these ants can pull out of themselves, a simple health boost just turns out to be exactly what most of them really needed. The Scar Scouts become surprisingly tanky since they've got the lower half of damage modifiers helping them out now. The Spear Scars just gain twice as much airtime as before, which is a pretty long bit of time since they were already annoying to land hits on to begin with, and everything in this combat room that would have dealt only 1 damage, which is literally any source of damage you could possibly take in this room if what I'm observing is correct here, now deals 2 damage. Of all the factions and subspecies of asshole populating the kingdom, a nice dose of void cancer seems to have helped the ant colony tremendously more than anyone else. So think about that the next time you're pouring fresh black coffee on top of an anthill in your backyard, you monster. Number 10, Southeastern Act 2 Deep Docks. So this is rapidly becoming a very uncomfortable trend this game is committing to, where they just put a bunch of cannon fodder at the first 56 waves of a gauntlet, and then conclude the performance with 2 massive throbbing assholes at the same time. And it's not even like hard most of the time. But this one very much is. A physical shockwave produced by an explosion is just barely out of range of what Magma Bell can apparently protect. Only except what if 1.03 was like, haha, go fuck your ma, Rusty. It's Flint fuck flyers. You can't, it protects it now. Magma Bell works. Magma Bell works now. Go fuck your mom. Creating this window of entropy during the final wave where all it takes is one slightly awkwardly thrown bomb and then that snowballs into some other mistake and shit, I'm dead. I feel like this one's hard, but not for an unfair reason, more like a chaotic reason. And all the chaos seems perfectly orchestrated to maximize the chances of you forgetting these mobs also explode upon death, just as a final middle finger stretching from beyond the canyons of hell. I don't like these enemies and I don't like this gauntlet. Jump preemptively to meet them in the air, pop a thread storm, maybe set up a sting shard, and then just pray to God that's enough. Number 9, Act 3 Whispering Vaults. God damn, those Vault Keepers some hoes when they on the Eldritch perk. Gauntlet waves tending to be a lot less challenging when there's just 2 of the same enemy is an argument I still think is worth defending, but we've obviously ran into a couple exceptions here along the way, and some pretty big ones too. The Vaultborn have this weird hovering movement pattern that give them all a nice habit of staying lined up for you, making it pretty easy to pop them open with a Silk Spear or a Weaver Silk Shot, but being black-threaded means one shot from either almost certainly will not be enough. They do overstay their welcome quite a bit, which makes the occasional 2-tap pretty hard to avoid. But the main dish is the pair of cone heads at the end, which I think pose a higher difficulty hill than most Act 2 bosses. You can memorize the Vault Keeper spawns if you really want to, and just try your absolute best to plug that area with as much damage as you can, but the Eldritch plot armor they bring with them makes it extremely difficult to kill one immediately as they walk in. Number 8, Crust King Khann. I had to move this one around quite a bit, as is the case with most of whatever the upper echelon of a list ends up being, but I noticed this one getting pushed repeatedly further from its initial spot all the way at number 3 down to where it's landed now. And I think the root cause of this decision can be found solely in the region itself, for spending the first 3 rooms acting like it just forgot how shortcuts worked. Of all the pre-boss gauntlets, Coral King Cock has the pre-bossiest, at 18 whole enemies with some additional light hazard avoidance peppered into the design of the room. The crusty Crust Lord himself isn't complicated or hard to keep up with, but he slings around some fat meat with that 1600 HP, and any lack of patience can sometimes lead to unnecessary damage from something you could have just easily dodged if you were paying attention. Even with a boss included into the gauntlet itself, I still barely had more trouble with this encounter than the very first room on the same region, and maybe that's because this is the only room of the 4 that has nothing new left to throw at you. Number 7, the Unravelled. I don't know, this feels like another encounter that could only fit the definition of enemy gauntlet if you shove it through like 6 different language translations. But the encounter does begin with standard mobs, and a door opens right after the room is cleared. So fuck me, it's going in the video. The enemies here are really nothing special, just dreg husks and dreg wheels that intermittently invade the arena when the pile of unfolded laundry starts to feel embarrassed and just leaves for a minute. The dreg wheel here is kinda cool, I guess. It's a rare encounter that can only be fought in the Unravelled Gauntlet. I'm assuming because the way it moves is so damn weird that it can only properly attack in a room that just doesn't have a ceiling. But obviously the sentient stack of designer curtains makes up the lion's share of the dispute you're gonna have here. Because 1000 HP, mildly fresh out of Act 1, is something you just gotta take your time with. Like, that shit just does not go down easy. And dodging the spears during his second phase with what I'm assuming to be 7 or even less HP at this point feels as awkward as taking a shower and using the curtain to dry yourself off. However, something cool about this boss, this and 4th Chorus, to my knowledge, are the only 2 bosses that have HP values tied to when they stagger. The Unravelled staggers once at 80% HP, and then a second time at 40% HP. It's a silver lining thinner than the enamel of an alcoholic's molars, but it is a nice, easy way of tracking your progress during the fight. Number 5 and 6, the first 2 floors of Coral Tower. I'm gonna split up the Coral Tower into each of its individual gauntlet rooms, and I'm gonna explain why once we actually get to why it's relevant, but just as an appetizer explanation here, I think listing them all side by side and having them take up this 4-section wide block of the video would be a dishonest portrayal of how wide the difficulty gap feels between these rooms. Just some background info on the Karak civilization here. This nation of iron-skinned Chaddingtons had a good 50% of Farloom under its boot during their prime. These motherfuckers lived and breathed conquest culture, like they took the blood of their enemies and put it in their cereal every morning. So loyal and so fierce in combat that it felt like a hive mind, and I feel like that's why these gauntlets are set up the way they are. The first floor of the tower is only made up of Karakas, Kakris, and Yagos. It's sort of implied that these enemies made up the common infantry of the order, and they set the foundation of how you're expected to move and fight your way up the region, so that by the time the elites show up in the second floor, you feel a bit more prepared. Each wave feels very messy, but there's still a visible structure hidden in its bones. You're slashing through the ranks of an entire army commanded by a warlord who was both strong and strategic enough to have controlled half the kingdom at some point, and having the gauntlets emulate this feeling of storming a castle communicates that very well. That battle cry thundering through the whole region from the tower's peak is the sound of him moving his pieces across the board with disgusting meticulosity, playing his cards and sending his units in the exact order he needs to, just to make the hike up the tower as painful for you as possible. Number 4, Verdania. Man, I saw water and just instantly whipped out Volt Vessels like I was on a mission from God. Like, I was so confident that I just knew what this gauntlet was gonna throw at me, and when I was done with this room, the sheer malice I felt for these green bean, gluten-free ass meth geckos could have left my apartment with the kinetic energy of a hydrogen bomb. Cheese is not a word in the Verdanian vocabulary. It just doesn't exist. Not even Volt Vessels is guaranteed to land because the erratic teleport move they have just gives them a free escape card for so many different tools and skills that would have had no problem landing a hit on anything else. I might just suck generational amounts of balls at fighting these guys, I don't know. I'm more than happy to concede to that possibility, but holy shit. This gauntlet was something else. Number 3, High Halls. High Halls is one of those gauntlets that allow you to meet it on your terms. The requiring of Faydown, the possible assistance of Garmund and Shakra, and a hidden way to permanently disable the Claw Maidens all suggest that this piece of the melody is your last of the 3 to be obtained. With 28 enemies in total split up into 13 waves, 20 of which are capable of sustained flight, which is a large contributor to its difficulty, it's the most the game ever demands from the player at any point during Act 2 that isn't just a boss encounter. You're kinda supposed to be overwhelmed during this gauntlet, but there are some hidden mechanics at play here that ensure the skill floor doesn't stretch too high. The pair of choir clappers, for instance, that spawn in as the last wave have unique behavior where only one can attack at a time, while the other retreats backwards. Something I didn't even notice myself until I saw it written on the wiki, and still doubted its validity until I just replayed footage and watched them do it. Removing the Claw Maiden nest in High Halls also prevents them from appearing in this room, and like I said earlier, NPC assistance is available. Like, the game does a pretty great job rewarding how much of the game you played prior. And if you do that, you can set yourself up in a way that challenging this room doesn't just feel like walking into a lion's den. Number 2, Skarrsinger Karmelita. I can't believe I'm counting this as a gauntlet. This decision is absolutely gonna have my name on it. Like, is this cool with everyone? Like, I feel like I'm making a mistake here. This feels egregiously unfair to both bosses and gauntlets. This would be like if you got to Melania at the Halo Tree, but she wouldn't even pay you any attention until you fought a wave of space agents or some bullshit. Why does she need a gauntlet? Is she concerned that I haven't stretched enough and I might pull a hamstring and break the flow of battle? Am I supposed to be warming up for calisthenics? Or maybe she's just too busy performing and doesn't even know I've arrived until she turns around and observes the lone spider standing over a pile of what used to be her secret service. The last claw enemies are very cool, exuding aura and all that. I still think the gauntlet could have done completely without them. I would just rather these enemies exist in other places in the game and the dream as well, or just not exist at all. Placing 2 of the same enemy on the last wave of a gauntlet has already become an egregious trend with these rooms in my opinion, but 2 unique gauntlet exclusive enemies right before one of the hardest bosses in the game? Cousin, my ass is gonna be floor pizza by the time she even looks at me. Number 1, Coral Tower's 3rd floor. This must be Christmas Eve because this bitch just keeps on giving and it won't stop. The exact moment in time when whoever was in charge of enemy placement just decided this game's been in the oven for long enough. Balanced waves? Fuck that, here's some platforming. Here's some platforming on the house to go with your 33 mob shit bitch burrito. Hope you have Ascendant grip on you, cause we see you touch the ground for a second and Ray Lewis is coming in to dunk your 8-legged ass into the Shadow Realm. You liked fighting the Colosseum and Kingdom's Edge so much? Well, here, now you get to do it as a main quest objective. Most enemy gauntlets are courteous enough to give you a gradual build-up in difficulty before throwing the trump cards at you for the final waves. Not here, fucko. This is a gauntlet inside of a gauntlet. Those first 2 floors you cleared, that was your build-up. I didn't enjoy this room. I don't think you're supposed to enjoy this room. This room gives you more tasking than most retirement hobbies. Coral enemies are stout enough by themselves since most of them either deal 2 damage or 1 damage twice, but ascending the tower and fighting them on their terms is a horrifying insight on just how insanely good these guys fight as a team. If there's a ground-based enemy, there's always an anti-air backup unit fighting alongside it. If there's an anti-air enemy, there's always a reason to stay your ass on the ground. If only one of these are true, you're not paying attention to the spikes on the floor, bozo. Here you go, have some free damage. The whole theme of the Coral King here is to feel like you're fighting through oceans of his most loyal subjects, and that's a theme this region painstakingly commits to, very much at your expense. Close attackers, ranged attackers, area denial, jellyfish with your mama jokes, the fucking Hulk, apparently. And all of it must be done without dying a single time, lest you repeat Gauntlets 1 and 2, because the shortcut only becomes available upon completing all 3 main gauntlets in the tower. Welcome to the reason why I put this above Karmelita. There is no way to refill tool uses in between gauntlets except via Craftbind, and your only means of silk restoration lies in the crust crawlers and Yumas you find before each gauntlet. No matter what your needle level is, Yumas always die in 1 hit, and assuming your needle is Act 3 ready, the crust crawler will most likely die in 2. Prior to the 3rd room, this awards 12 silk, plus the 3 silk hearts. Fuck it, I'll even give you Weave Light too, so that's 16 in total. You cannot restore your silk gauge from 0 to 100%. There is no way to do so in between gauntlets. It is impossible. If your HP is full, you probably don't have any silk. If your HP is full and you have silk, you probably needed to fire off all your reds to make that clutch happen. Like, you are missing something when you arrive here. That is the point. The point is for you to make it up here with several battle scars and even more empty pockets. This isn't just a war of attrition. This is Khann inviting Hornet to game night to play Civ 6. This would be like if Hornet had her own game piece and Risk. I purchased Hollow Knight Silksong, okay? Not fucking Silksong the Gathering. I don't want to spend the weekend grinding bugs of might and magic with the boys. What I want is for you to pick your Krusty Krab looking ass up from off your throne of obesity and down here to ground level so you can face me with the respect I've been earning for the last 12 hours.